Again today the Gemara on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph, right at the beginning of the Yamud. Ve'ema. So here, this is a continuation from the Gemara before, where it said the halacha regarding a person that gave over his daughter to the shluchim of the husband, to deliver the wife to the husband of the home of the husband. And if along the way she was mizana, so the question is, what status does she have at this point? Is she still a nara ma'irasa, and therefore she will get skila after the first stage of marriage? If she has a relation with someone else, she gets skila. Or from that point, because she was already given over to the husband's agents that came to deliver her, she gets only chenek, because she's already married. Once you're married, it's a different misa, which is only chenek. So the Gemara before brought the psukim to say that, well, the pasuk actually that it said was, this is relevant for the Gemara here, Liznai's base avia. Only if she was mizana when she was still in the father's house, then she still gets skila. But if she's already with the husband's shluchim on the way to the husband's home, she only gets chenek. So now, on this the Gemara asks, maybe we should say, if she was given over already to the shluchim of the husband, but then she changed her mind, and she went back home. I should say that she goes back to her previous status. And therefore, she's again a naira mayrasa, and the nisuin is not really a full nisuin. And so therefore, at this point, she should still be getting skila. So what the Gemara is asking is, according to Rashi, it's not really a question. It's more of a shaila. The Gemara is wondering, what would be the halacha? You're telling me that once she was given over to the shluchim of the Baal, so from that point forward, she's already fully married. And therefore, there's only chenek. But the question is, what if she turns around and she goes back to her father's house? There's her status that has changed back to being a naira meirasa because she went back.
Good question.
And especially the Gemara's question is based on the fact that the source was Liznai's base of Via. And we said, once she left the father's home, even if she did not arrive to the husband's home, but she's on the way with the shluchim of the husband, but she's not base of Via anymore. She's not home anymore. So therefore the Gemara is wondering, if so, what's if she turns around and goes back home? Then it is base of Via. So maybe we should say that she does have the status of a naira mayrasa, which is chayiv skila. Amarave, so Rav answers, your question you're asking here, or you're a quandary really, you're wondering about this halacha, kvar paska tana de Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel already resolved this. Based on what Rabbi Shmuel said regarding the halacha of a woman that makes a neder, we'll answer this shaila as well. The Tana debate Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Shmuel said as follows, and this is in the parsha of a woman that makes a neder. She makes a vow. So there it says, v'neder almana o grusha, when there's an almana or grusha that makes a vow, kol asher osra al nafsha, whatever vow she made and she prohibited upon herself, yokum aleh, it remains. There's nobody that could annul these vows for her. Not a husband, because she has no husband, and not a father either. She's out of the father's possession. So the question regarding this pasuk is, Ma tamad laima? Why does this pasuk have to say b'chlal? It's an extra pasuk. It's obvious. Once she got fully married, she's out of the father's possession. And now, once she's widowed or divorced, so she's out of the husband's possession. So of course there's nobody that could annul her vows for her. So why does the pasuk have to say that the vows will remain? Elo. So what is this pasuk coming to say? It's referring to this case that we're speaking about here. What happens in a case where the father gave over his daughter to the shluchim of the husband, or the shluchim of the father gave over his daughter to the shluchim of the husband, and she did not yet arrive to her husband's home. She's in between. This pasuk here, v'neder almana grusha, is coming to speak about a case where she became an almana and a grusha in this condition, when she was in between. Exactly. In other words, we do have already understood from the psukim before, when she's still in the father's home, so the father annuls the vows. Once she arrived to the husband's home, the husband annuls the vows. That's clear. We know that already.
We're not here, not there.
This pasuk over here is coming to talk about what happens if it's in between. She's on the way. She's en route to go to the husband. And then, and on the way, her husband to be, I mean, she's already married to some extent. There's an Edison, but the husband to be fully passed away, or she receives the news that he decided to divorce her on the way to the home. So what happens now? What do I say about the status of this girl? Beis avia shalzu, or beis baila shalzu? Do I say that she still belongs to her father's home because it turned out that the husband that she was going to, there's nowhere to go to? Or do I say that no, once she was already on the way to go to her husband, even if she didn't yet arrive there, but the fact is, from that moment, she already belongs to her husband? Ella loy malach. So what the pasuk here is saying to you is that I can't say that she's not from the father's home and not from the husband's home anymore. So it comes to tell you, kivin sheyatsa shah achas mirishus av shuv eni yachal hafer. That once she left one moment from the rishus of the father, so that's it. She does not belong to the father's possession anymore. She's out of the father's house. And on the other hand, she really belongs to her husband already, but the husband died, or the husband divorced her. So now that's what the pasuk is saying, that there's nobody here to annul her vows. So what's the Gemara saying? That from here I could learn the same thing regarding what we were speaking about when I said before, Lizna is Beis Aviyah. Even if she decides to turn around and go back to her father's home, but I see from this parsha of Nedarim that once she leaves her husband's home, that's it. She left her father's home, and the father, that is, can't annul her vows anymore. So the same thing over here regarding the question of what status does she have, regarding what einish should she get, chenek or skila. Once she leaves her father's house, so she's not in Beis Aviyah anymore. Just like regarding Nedarim, she's not in Beis Aviyah anymore. So if she's mizana after she left, even if she decides to turn around, she's not anymore in Beis Aviyah. That's right. So then she'll be chayiv and chenek. Rav Papa says, we learned this also in the following Mishnah. Habal Naira Meirasa. Person that has a relation with this Naira Meirasa. Again, Naira Meirasa means the girl that is only after the first stage of marriage, and you chayiv specifically skila, not chenek. And a chayiv, so he won't be chayiv, Naira, Besula, Meirasa, Vihi Beveis Aviyah. So you have all these conditions. It has to be a Naira, she has to be a Basula, and it has to also be a Ma'irasa, first stage of marriage, and also Vihi Beveis Aviyah, that she's still in the father's house. So the Gemara explains what all of these details refer to. These are the conditions that the Torah said. He's not going to be chayiv skila. So the Gemara explains, Bish loy min naira v'loy begeres. We understand what it means when it says naira, and that excludes what? It excludes a begeres. Once she's a begeres, so then the chiv is not going to be skila, it'll be a different chiv, different einish. Besula is v'loy beula. Besula is saying that if she already had a relation with someone else before this, so she's not a Besula anymore. We understand what that excludes. Ma'oirasa, when it says that she has to be only after the first stage of marriage, that means v'loy nesua, not after she's fully married. If she's fully married, then it's going to be chenek, not skila. Now, but when it says beveis aviyah, then it adds that it has to be when she's in the father's home and not where else? What is this coming to exclude? It seems to be identical to what we're saying, ma'irasa v'loy nesua. Usually a ma'irasa means when you're still by the father, when she's still living with her father. Nesua means when she moves in with her husband. So what's this additional point here that it adds, beveis aviyah? Lav, don't you think, lav l'mutim masara av l'shluchei abal. This is adding that even in a case where she didn't arrive yet to her husband's home, and it's not fully nesua, but the very fact that she left her father's home, so she's not anymore beis aviyah, so then the chayiv will not be skila. It'll only be chenek. So this additional detail here of beis aviyah shows that even on the way, b'derech, she's already not chayiv skila. He's not chayiv skila. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak afanana mitanina. We learned this also in the following Braisa, or maybe Mishnah, not sure. So it says over here, Habal Eishes Ish. The Mishnah says, a person that has a relation with an Eishes Ish, Kivin Shenichnasa L'Rishus Habal. So, L'Nisuin, that is, as soon as she enters into the Rishus of her husband for Nisuin, for full marriage, Afal Pi Shaloi Nivala, even if the husband that she's fully married to was not boil her yet, we had this in the Gemara before, once there's a chuppah, even without being boil her, Haba'aleh Arei Zebechenek. So the one that has a relation with her only is chayiv, which misa chenek. So now, the Gemara is medayik, the expression that the Mishnah here says. What did the Mishnah say? Nichnesa l'rishos habal ba'alma. It says in the Mishnah, she enters into the rishos of the husband. It does not say how, to what extent. Usually the expression the Mishnah uses in such a case is, as Rashi points out, Nichnesa l'chuppah. It should have said specifically, if she enters into the chuppah, but it doesn't use the term chuppah. So therefore, Shema Mina, the reason the Mishnah is using the term Nichnas l'Rishus Habal without mentioning Chuppah is because it wants to include also when she was given over to the Shluchim of the Baal, even on the way to the husband's house. That's already out of the possession of the father. He relinquished control over her, he gave her over, he sent her off. Shema Mina, so from this we see that from that point forward, it's already Chenek. Even if she turns back, it's too late.
You need all three of them.
You what, again?
You need all three of these.
Which three?
You have three, just had three cases that's talking about when you give it to the shliach what do you need all three of these cases?
The different teifanim of she was given over to the shliach. If the father gives over to the shliach,
Do you have three right? You just
Oh.
gave three
Yeah,
right.
these three conditions, all these conditions.
3 rayas, or three is better than 1, no?
Okay.
Okay, here you go.
Chazaka.
Yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying. Oh,
Okay,
man.
that's good.
Okay, now we continue sort of a little bit on a different subject. The next Mishnah is going to discuss the obligations of a father to feed his children. Is he obligated to feed his children? Is he not obligated? Let's see. Sagt Heilige Mishnah, Ha'av, a father, ein chayev b'mezainis bitay. He's not obligated to feed his daughter while he's alive. Okay, Nazeh Medrash, Dorash Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah lefnei chachamim. This is a halacha that Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, so he expounded upon this in front of the chachamim, bekerem beyavne, in the vineyard of Yavne. This is an expression that refers to the chachamim that were together in Yavne and they were sitting in rows, like the rows of a vineyard. So over there he said as follows: Habanim yirshu. The sons, so they inherit. V'habanais yizainu, and the daughters they get fed. Now, when it says here Habanim Yirshu, what does this refer to? So he says, Ma Habanim and in Yarshin El Alacha Misasaav, just like the sons. When they inherit, they only inherit after the father passes away. Af Habanis. So too, the obligation of a father that his daughter should be fed from his money, Ein Izainis El Alacha Misasavian. The obligation is that they have to be fed after he passes away, but not in his lifetime. So to clarify exactly what the Mishnah means by this, by what Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah means by this comparison of the sons and the daughters, so Rashi explains that these are 2 conditions that are written into a Kesubos. When it says here in the Mishnah that the sons are inheriting, it's not referring to the regular inheritance that children inherit from a father. Rather, what it's referring to is, in a Kesubos, there are 2 conditions that are written together. One condition is that the banim, the sons, will inherit their mother's Kesubos, meaning if his wife has her sons that are not the father's sons, it's her sons, and the Yerusha of the father is going to be given out, the sons will inherit the mother's Kesubos separate from the whole entire Yerusha that's being distributed. And we'll learn about this later here in the Masechta Barichas. It's coming up very soon. This is what's called Kesubas Benin Dichrin. The Kesubah of the mother that goes over to her sons, the males. Dichrin means the Zecharim. And that's one condition it says in the Kesubah. Another condition it says in the Kesubah is regarding the fact that when a father passes away, even though the daughters are not Yarshim, only the sons inherit, the daughters do not inherit anything, but nevertheless there's a condition that the father promises and obligates himself in the Kesubah that the daughters will get fed from his money. So what Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah is saying is, just like this special Yerusha that the sons receive from their mother's Kesubah only applies after he passes away, so too the special obligation to feed the daughters is only after the father passes away. But in his lifetime, he's not obligated to feed his daughters. That's the halacha of the Mishnah.
Can I ask you a stupid question? Life was so difficult in those times that only when people are passing, our life is totally different. We take care of our children.
Let's wait and see what the Holy Gemara will say. So the Gemara, it's all here. The Gemara has the answers for all the questions for all times, not only those times, but for our times as well. Sagt the Gemara, b'mezainis bitay hudei nechayev. What does it say here in the Mishnah? When it comes to feeding your daughter, so a person is not obligated. B'mezainis b'nai, but that indicates. But when it comes to obligation of a person to feed his sons, chayev, that you are obligated. The daughters, let them fend for themselves, but the sons, you have to feed them. Another diak from the Mishnah. Bitay, his daughter as well. Nami chayevu deleke. There's no obligation. But he does have a mitzvah to feed his daughters, right? So what's the difference? A chayva would mean that we force him. This is an obligation that he took upon himself in the Kesubah or whatever, and we could force him, we can confiscate his money if he's not going to fulfill his obligation. A mitzvah is, you have a mitzvah to do it. These are your children, you have a mitzvah to do so, to feed your children, but we're not going to force you. So it seems from our Mishnah that even if we're not going to force you, it's not a chayva, but it's still a mitzvah. Says the Gemara, mani masnisim. But the question now is, who is the opinion of the Tana of our Mishnah? Loy Rab Meir, Loy Rab Yehuda, v'Loy Rab Yochanan ben Breke. None of the following Tanoim which are quoted in this Braisa here. The Tanya, because in the Braisa we learned that it says about this subject of the father feeding his children. So the Rab Meir, the first opinion here is mitzvah lozan is habanais. A person has a mitzvah, not an obligation, where we force him, just a mitzvah. Mitzvah to feed his daughters, kavachayim lebanim. And most definitely, he also has to feed his sons as well. Why do you have to feed your sons more than you feed your daughters? The aski b'Torah, because they're learning Torah, so therefore they need your support to be able to learn Torah. Divrei Rab Meir. This is Rab Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda says also, Rabbi Yehuda basically holds the same thing, but Rabbi Yehuda says that the daughters, it's more important, the mitzvah to feed the daughters is more important than the mitzvah to feed the sons. Mitzvah lozan esabanim, it's a mitzvah to feed your sons, definitely a mitzvah to feed your daughters. Why? Mishum zilusa. Because you don't want the daughters to be embarrassed, have to go and collect money for themselves. It's a much bigger embarrassment for girls to have to collect money for themselves than the sons. Rabbi Yochanan, by the way, what's the difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? They're both saying that the father has to serve the sons and the daughters. The difference is, so what's if the father doesn't have enough of both? Who's more important? So according to Rabbi Meir, the ones that are learning Torah are more important, the sons. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, the ones that are going to be embarrassed to go collect money are more important. When it comes to feeding your daughters, it's actually an obligation. It's not just a mitzvah, but it's an obligation you have. When is that though? Only after the father passes away. While the father is alive, both the sons, the daughters are not fed from the father at all. It's not his obligation, and there's no unique mitzvah of the fact that he's their father either to feed them. So now if you look at all these three opinions quoted in this Braisa, our Mishnah does not go according to neither of them. Mani Masnisin, who's our Mishnah? Rab Meir, if it follows the opinion of Rab Meir, Ha'amar, Rab Meir has said, Banim mitzvah, that to feed your sons is only a mitzvah. And before, we were medayik from the Mishnah, that the Mishnah holds that to feed your sons is a chayva, is an obligation. You must, we can force you. Rabbi Yehuda, it's the same question. According to Rabbi Yehuda, ha'ama banim nami mitzvah. Or some are going to say ha'ama nami banim mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda basically says the same thing. When it comes to feeding your sons, it's only a mitzvah. And from our Mishnah we see it's an obligation. And if our Mishnah would follow Rabbi Yechanan ben Breike's opinion, afil mitzvah nami leka. Rabbi Yechanan ben Breike says, feeding your daughters in your lifetime, not only is it not an obligation, it's not even a mitzvah. He said, right, only after he passes away. But in their lifetime, the lashon of Rabbi Yechanan ben Breike was, elu ve'elu ein ani zayin. You don't have to feed them at all. So who in the person's lifetime? In the person's lifetime. So our Mishnah does not go like any of these opinions. So the Gemara will show that it's possible to say that our Mishnah follows all of these opinions, and you can choose whichever one you want. Iba Yisayim Rab Meir. If you want, you could explain our Mishnah like Rab Meir. Iba Yisayim Rab Yehuda, or even Rab Yehuda. And Iba Yisayim Rab Yechanan ben Breike. You could explain our Mishnah like Rab Yechanan ben Breike. Iba Yisayim Rab Meir. We can say it goes according to Rab Meir. And this is how you have to understand our Mishnah. Ha'av Eine Chayev Mezainis Bitay. A father does not have to feed his daughter. And really, and also he doesn't have an obligation to feed his son. Before we said bita, he doesn't have to, but a son you do have to. But now the Gemara is saying no. The way to read the Mishnah is it goes together. Not the daughter and not the son that you have an obligation to feed. Ha mitzvah bebita. However, it's still a mitzvah. It's your daughter. So the father does have a mitzvah to feed his daughter. And kavachayim lebanim. And most definitely, according to Rab Meir, you have an obligation, or not an obligation, sorry, a mitzvah to feed the sons because they learn Torah. So so the reason why the Mishnah specifies the daughter, even though it's not dafka the daughter, it's even the son as well, is because the Mishnah is coming to teach you dafila bitay, that even when it comes to your daughter, which does not learn any Torah, it's only that you don't have an obligation to feed her, but nevertheless, there is still a mitzvah to feed her. So then it fits with Rav Meir's opinion. Okay. That both the sons and the daughters, you don't have an obligation, but you have a mitzvah to feed them. We could say the same thing, similar in the reverse. Rabbi Yehuda, that the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, and this is how you read the Mishnah. A father is not obligated to feed his daughter, and most definitely he's not obligated to feed his son. Again, this is Rabbi Yehuda's approach that says that it's more important to feed your daughter so that she doesn't become embarrassed. So if you don't have to feed your daughter, for sure you don't have to feed your son. But there is a mitzvah to feed your son. Most definitely it's a mitzvah to feed your daughter so they shouldn't have to be embarrassed to collect money for themselves. So why does our Mishnah specify specifically the daughter if the same halacha applies for the son? The chiddush of our Mishnah is that even when it comes to your daughter, that there's a big concern that she'll become embarrassed if you won't feed her. Nevertheless, you don't have an obligation to feed her. It's only a mitzvah to feed her. So the Mishnah could fit with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Or the Mishnah could go according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika's opinion that says that a person has an obligation to feed his daughter after he passes away, but in his lifetime there's no obligation whatsoever, no mitzvah either. And this is how you read our Mishnah. He does not have to feed his daughter, and he doesn't have to feed his son either. And really, there's no mitzvah either. Even though the Mishnah uses the expression of chayva, don't be medayik that expression. It really meant there's no obligation and there's not even a mitzvah either. Because when it wanted to speak about what the father's obligation for his daughter is after he passes away, or actually from the father's money. What's the obligation that the money should be used to feed the daughters after he passes away? So there it actually is an obligation. So regarding that time period, it uses the expression of chayva, taninami ein chayiv. So therefore, regarding his lifetime, it also uses the expression that he's not chayiv. But it also really means not only is he not chayiv, but it's not even a mitzvah at all for the father to feed his children in his lifetime. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika's opinion, and it could fit with our Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Eloi, Amar Reish Lakish, Mishom, Rabbi Yehuda, Bar Chanina. Be'usha hiskinu. In Usha, Chachamim instituted. Usha was a place, one of the places when the Chachamim went from outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and they were in different golis, and the 10 different places that they went to. One of the places was Usha. And over there they instituted as follows. Shehei Adam Zon Esbanav Es B'naisav Kishein Ketanim. That a person is obligated to feed his sons and daughters when they're ketana, when they're young. Taisus here points out that what this refers to is ketanim in this expression. The Gemara here is actually above the age of 6 years old. Taisus says if the ketanim, if they're below the age of 6, then everybody agrees that you're fully obligated to feed your children. Absolute obligation, as we'll see later in the Masechta. Over here it's saying even above the age of 6, they instituted that a person is obligated to feed his daughters. Now when it says here obligated means a real chiyuv. Meaning if he does not, they could force him to feed his daughters. Or his children, his sons and daughters. Now the question was asked about this, do we paskin like this, that they said that in Usha they instituted this, or do we not paskin this way? Tashema, so I'll bring you a raya that we do not paskin this way. We cannot force a father to feed his children that are ketanim. Because when they came to Rav Yehuda and they said that it was a person that did not want to feed his children, so what happened? What did Rav Yehuda do? Amalahu, he said to them, Yarod Yolda. Yarod gave birth. Yarod, Rashi says, is a tanin, some kind of a snake, or the translation that I saw is a jackal, which is, I guess, some kind of whatever. Bnei Masa Shadya, and you throw the children on the people of the city. So just like the snake that doesn't treat its children well, it doesn't take care of its children, you're a person that's like a snake that throws away your children and doesn't take care of your children. So what's the Gemara proving from this? What did Rabbi Yehuda do? He didn't force. He didn't go and force the father. He didn't confiscate from his money. Right? All he did is he embarrassed him. He was rebuking him. He was screaming at him. So in order to get him to feed his children, but we can't force him though. We can't force him. Okay, so therefore that proves that when Usha they were masakin, that you force, it's an obligation. We see here that he didn't force him. Similar, they came in front of Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda said about this person that doesn't want to feed his children, take this mortar, or take this big thing and turn it upside down so you could stand on top of it in a high place, get up in public, V'leikum, and get up, and v'leiman, announce the following. Either the father himself should announce this, or shliach tzibur, somebody else should announce it for him. Or ve'boy bane. Even a raven wants his children, takes care of his children. V'ahu gavrule boy bane. And this individual does not take care of his children. So basically, humiliate him in public to get him to feed his children. But again, what we see over here is we're not physically forcing him or confiscating from his money, but we're going to. The only thing we can do is humiliate him. The Gemara asks on this expression that he said they should say about this person that a raven feeds his children. a raven feeds its children, but vaksiv livnei oirev asher yikro, that the children of a raven calls out to the Eibusha because the parents do not take care of their children by ravens. So the Gemara answers like Kashi, it's not a question. Ha b'chivri ha b'ochmi. Depends when they're white or when they're black. According to Rashi, this means when they're white, when they're young and they're white, the mother and the father does not take care of their children. Later, when they become black, then they love them, then they take care of them. Taisa says that chivri and ochmi are two different kinds of ravens: white ravens, black ravens, and they have different natures. The white ones take care of their children, and the black ones don't take care of the children, or maybe the opposite. So that's the story with the ravens. Another example the Gemara brings, ki avasal kamei de Rava. When they came to Rava about an individual that didn't want to feed his children, Amar lei, so he said to this person, Nichalachtem zani banech mit tzedakah. What do you want? Your children should be fed from tzedakah. Why aren't you feeding your children? Now, after all of this, the Gemara says that we will not force parents to feed their children. We'll do everything. We'll humiliate the father. We'll scream at him, but we can't physically force him. But this is all said, or this was not said only if the father was not wealthy. So he can't feed his children. So but he has to make an effort anyways, and all we could do is humiliate him. But if the father is wealthy, he has all that money, and he's still not feeding his children. We're gonna force him to feed his children even against his will. And the reason is because this is no less than tzedakah. By tzedakah, there's a halacha, as the Gemara will bring right now, that a person is forced sometimes to give tzedakah for certain causes. So over here, if it's your own children and you're not feeding them, so we'll force the person to give at least tzedakah. No less than regular tzedakah. If he's a regular, whatever it is, however he has to be forced, we'll force him to give tzedakah to his children. Ki hada Rava. Like the story that happened with Rava, Kafil Rav Nasan Barami, he forced Rav Nasan Barami, Va'apik Minei, and he took out of him Daled Meir Zuzil Tzedakah, 400 zuz for tzedakah. Apparently he was wealthy, and he forced him to give tzedakah. So you see that when it comes to the mitzvah of tzedakah, you can force someone to give tzedakah, so therefore no less should apply with a father that's wealthy regarding his own children. But here, there's a very big discussion in Tosfos, and then many of the Rishonim and the Achrayim that discuss this, the fact that you force for tzedakah, because Tosfos brings from a Gemara in Chulin that says that any time there's a mitzvah in the Torah, where the Torah writes the schar of the mitzvah, and one of them is tzedakah, because the pasuk says, L'man yivarechecha, then we don't force for such a mitzvah. Only a mitzvah where the Torah doesn't say the schar could you force a person to fulfill that mitzvah. So why over here by tzedakah where the Torah says the schar, why do we force for tzedakah? That's the question of Tosfos, and there's many, many answers to this question. One of the answers that Tosfos gives is that we can't force physically. We could only force with words. Or another answer.
How do you force with words?
I don't know. You only Another answer Tosfos gives is that tzedakah, besides being a mitzvah saseh, this speaks Parsha. Parsha Shrei is the place where it speaks about tzedakah, and there are two loises. Loisa amitz es yadcha, v'lois sikpoitz es levavecha. So therefore, because there's also two loises, therefore you could force for the mitzvah of tzedakah. Loisa amitz, do not keep your hand closed, do not close your heart from giving tzedakah. So therefore you could force to give tzedakah. Amar Rabbi Loi, Amar Reish Lakish. Rabbi Loi said in the name of Reish Lakish, another takana that was instituted in Usha. But Usha is skinu, and Usha they instituted as follows: Hakaisav kol nechasav labanov. A person, while he's still alive, he goes and gives all of his properties, all of his possessions, all of his money as a gift to his children. Mm-hmm. So that's it. He has nothing. But he and his wife will be fed. The children that now got all this as a gift will have an obligation to feed their parents from this money. The question was asked, why do they have to institute this? There's actually something that's even greater than this that we already know from another place. Something even greater, that's even more of a chiddush was said, and that is almanasai. A person's almana after a person passes away, and his wife, the widow, nizaynes minuchasav, she gets fed from the money of her husband. That's what was said when you get to the almana. If so, the Gemara says, hu ve'ishtay mibaye. If in a case when almana, after the husband passed away, gets fed from this money, so do you have to tell me that the father and the mother, the parents will get fed from the children after if they gave all the money to them as a gift? Now, what's the Kal V'chomer that the Gemara is saying over here? So, okay, so first let's see the source of this halacha that the almana will get fed from the husband's possessions, and then we'll see exactly what the Gemara means by this Kal V'chomer. So the Gemara says as follows: the Shalach Ravin be'igrisei Shavin, Ravin that is sent in a letter the following halacha: Misha Meis, person passed away, V'iniach almana ubas, and what does he leave behind? A widow and one daughter. So now almanasai, his almana, as the halacha always is, nizainis minachastav. That's one of the conditions, that after he passes away, she gets fed from his money, and then the halacha is until she collects her ksubah, or until she gets remarried. So she can collect from his money for it to be fed. Now, Nisis, Habas, now there's only one person that's inheriting all of the money of the father. Who's inheriting all of the money here? The daughter. Right, so now, this daughter that's inheriting all of the father's money, she got married. What happens when a daughter inherits all the money of the father? Who now gets all this money? The husband. Her husband, the daughter's husband, is the one that gets all this money. When she gets married, the money that she inherited from her father now becomes the husband's money. Any money that a wife brings into a marriage goes to the husband. So now almanasai, but still, nevertheless, the almana, the widow, nizainis minachasav, will still get fed from this money. Mesa habas, when the daughter passes away, so now it's not even the money is not even in the daughter's possession. As long as she's alive, the daughter is alive, so the money is still hers. The husband eats from the paytis that belongs to her. That's the halacha, right? The money that a wife brings into it's like nichsim milog, right? So the husband eats from the paytis. But now after she passes away, who inherits all of this money that she brought in from the husband? So now the question is, at this point, now that the husband inherited all this money, does the almana, which is the mother-in-law, still get fed from this money here?
Who?
Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Achaysa shel Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina. So he said that the Al Yadi Hoya Maisa, by me there was such a story. For Amru, and they paskined Almanasai Nizainis Minachasav, that the almana still will get fed from this money even after the money now became the daughter's husband. It became the son-in-law now. It became his money, but nevertheless, the mother-in-law will still get fed from that money. Not so for sure. So Rashi explains why this is a big chiddush here, because usually the halacha is regarding an almana, right? So the almana gets fed from her husband's possessions. But here's the halacha though: if there's anybody that bought properties from the husband, the almana does not get fed from those properties. Why not?
Because of the son.
Why doesn't the almana get fed from Elikeach that bought the properties? Because imagine what's going to happen. Anytime a person buys a property and then he passes away, all of a sudden now the almana is going to come and say, the husband was obligated to feed me and I'm going to get fed from these properties. Okay. So the Gemara says there's a tikkun ha'olam. They were misakin that a buyer will never have obligation to take care of the seller's widows after he passes away, because then people are not going to want to buy any properties. Because I'm going to be obligated later to pay a widow for her mezainis. That's usually the takana. Now, this son-in-law over here that got this money from his wife has a status of a buyer. This is something the Gemara will tell us later, that even though technically he didn't buy anything, he didn't pay for it, he only inherited from his wife, but nevertheless he has the status of a buyer. So really the halacha should be that the almana should not get fed now from the son-in-law's properties, because he's a buyer, and a buyer does not have an obligation to feed the almana. But nevertheless, there was still misakin that she should get fed from that money. And the reason is because over here, the usual takana does not apply. The only reason they usually made this takana is because a buyer pays for this. And no one's going to want to buy if he knows that later he's going to have to feed the almana. Right. But over here, he didn't pay for it. Never paid for it. He's just getting it from his wife through the inheritance over here. So therefore, he's going to be obligated to feed the mother-in-law, the almana. Says now the Gemara, if so, who v'ishtay mi baya? In the lifetime, when they gave, if a person gives all of his money to his children and they got it as a gift, so needless to say that the mother is still going to have to be fed, right? So the father. The truth is that the father, it's not so simple. Why the case of the father being fed? Why that's a kal v'chomer? But let's talk just about the mother. If you're saying regarding the mother, that after the husband passes away, the mother's still going to be fed from her son-in-law's money, even though the son-in-law is technically a buyer and he should not have the obligation to feed the mother-in-law, but nevertheless we say that he's still obligated to feed the mother-in-law. When the father and mother are still alive, the mother for sure should have to be fed. If she has no money for herself, for sure she should have to be fed from this gift that was given to the children. Okay, Rashi points out of here an additional detail, that this gift that was given to the children is even different than a usual gift, because this halacha that a meicher is not obligated to feed a mother, it applies even by a gift. A person that received a gift from somebody. Reuven gives Shimon a gift. So if Reuven passes away, Reuven's wife can't come to Shimon later and say, feed me from this money because my husband gave it to you as a gift. It doesn't work that way. Once you give a gift, you don't feed. But Rashi over here says this gift is even stronger, because usually when you give a gift, there's the famous expression the Gemara says, "Yilav the ovid neichel nafshel yav lematanta." You don't give a gift to stam anybody. You give a gift to show a certain appreciation. So once it's given, it's fully given. But over here, person that gives everything to his children, it's not because of any appreciation. He decided to give. He wants to give all his children a gift. So for sure, there's no reason to say that the mother should not be fed. That's the pshat of the Gemara's question.
The son-in-law got it from the father. It's a dowry. You got it from the father.
Okay, but here we're talking about the children, though.
Okay,
so the Gemara answers that there's a reason why I would think this case is different, and therefore there has to be a special takana and usha. Mao the teime, I would think to say, hasam hu deleket the tarach. The whole reason why usually an almana is fed from the father's possessions after he passes away, and it goes so far that even after the son-in-law gets it as a buyer, still he's obligated to feed his mother-in-law, is because who else is going to feed her? So that's the reason why it's important to feed her. Aval hacha, but over here, when the father and mother are still alive and he gives this to his children, nitrach lididei ulidida. So you gave away all your money to your children. Very nice. You're a very, very generous person. Give such a gift. But now you have to work for yourself and earn more money. Kamash Malan. That's the chiddush, that even after he gives away the money, we don't say to him, go work for yourself. The children will still have to feed the father and mother. That was the takana that they made in Usha. Now, the question was asked, Hilchasa kavasei, ales hilcha kavasei. Do we paskin like this halacha of Usha or not? The Gemara brings a rai that we do not paskin like what they instituted. In other words, we will not force the children to feed the parents. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan was standing together. Also, Gavra, this individual came along. Gochen v'noshkel Rabbi Yonasan akara. He kissed Rabbi Yonasan at his feet. Amalei Rab Chanina turns to Rabbi Yonasan and says to him, why is he kissing your feet? What did he do for him? Amalei, so he said, Kaisiv nechasav laban of who? He wrote off all of his possessions for his son, for his children, v'asasinu lizane, and I forced his children to go ahead and feed the parents. Now, if you're going to say that we don't paskin like the takana of Usha, so mishum hachi asinu. So then I can understand that there's a chiddush here, that what Rabbi Yonasan did for this person is lefnim meshuras adin. He didn't have to force the children to feed the parents, so he did something lefnim meshuras adin. That's why this person is kissing his feet for doing something beyond the letter of the law. Eli yamri adina. But if you're going to say that this is the halacha that they must feed the parents, asinu boy, he has to go ahead and lefnim meshuras adin and force them. Obviously, it has to be done. He doesn't have. You have to go and kiss his feet for doing this. This is, or maybe the way the Gemara is read is Eli amri dina asinu boy. He's obligated to force them. So there's no chiddush involved in this. So therefore, we see from here that we don't paskin like this halacha, like this takana of Usha.
We don't paskin.